across to Mr. Kapil Sankhla, Supreme Court lawyer, who is joining us to discuss further more on this. Mr. Sankhla, thank you for taking out your time. It is, of course, a big relief for Rahul Gandhi and the Congress party because the Supreme Court has put a stay on the conviction and the Gujarat High Court order. What are the next steps, the legal step that needs to be taken?
The order of the Honorable Supreme Court is very interesting since it is in the light of what the Honorable High Court in a 126 page judgment has said and of the trial court. So it's a very interesting read in how the Honorable Supreme Court has interpreted it. And also the concept of maximum punishment, which in this case said even if it was 1 day less, then the issue of moral turpitude and the Representation of People Act would not have come into play. Having heard the Honorable Supreme Court at the first wicket, so to say, it would be quite an interesting matter to listen to and to be around, because interestingly, the Honorable Supreme Court also has made two very interesting observations. One is the observation as far as how the High Court is to conduct itself by a speaking order or non-speaking order, which is very interesting to read. And the second, interestingly, is that as far as the representation of people is concerned, the right of one individual versus the right of the constituency. Because in previous judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court had come down very heavy on politicians and had made some very caustic observations about the politicians, whether their right to contest elections, etc. is concerned. In this case, the Honorable Supreme Court has taken, I think, a divergent view, in my humble opinion. And therefore, let us see what the Honorable Supreme Court comes to say. As far as today is concerned, it is a big step for Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Gandhi's team, in the sense that that embargo of not contesting election has been taken away. So, let us see what happens. But these are very interesting times, as I've already stated, for law and for judiciary as well.
Our guest, Mr. Kapil Sankhla, so what do you think at this point in time? Because there were various questions that the Supreme Court raised against that the Gujarat High Court did not have proper reasoning as to why they gave such a huge punishment to Rahul Gandhi.
With all due respect to the Honorable Supreme Court, and these are my views alone, the question whether maximum punishment should be given or not to be given is regularly questioned in the High Court and the Honorable Supreme Court. There are also, I think, plethora of judgments where the High Courts and Supreme Courts have stated that the trial court, on appreciating the trial evidence, if it comes to a finding as far as the punishment is concerned, the courts would not usually interfere with those judgment or that order or the quantum of punishment. Of course, there are certain intervening circumstances when there is failure of justice under the criminal revision system, where you take that matter before the High Court and Supreme Court and you argue that this was not the case where the maximum punishment should have been given. So the Honorable Supreme Court saying that though a 126 page order has been written by the Honorable High Court, but no valid reasoning has been given, I would leave it to a question between the Honorable High Court and the Honorable Supreme Court. But the second part is very interesting. The second part is the observation of the Honorable Supreme Court that even if 1 day less punishment was given, the Representation of People Act would not have been applicable, Section 8(1) would not have been applicable. He would still be entitled to contest elections. Now, let us actually test this on a far-reaching consequences, because if it is just an observation of the Honorable Supreme Court in passing, it is all right. Otherwise, it would actually open floodgates of litigation by other politicians who would say that, X number of days less and I would be entitled to Y. And that would be probably in the teeth of various other pronouncements of the Honorable Supreme Court and various high courts all over India. So, as I said, that it is quite at a preliminary stage right now to get into what the observations of the Honorable Supreme Court were. But it is my genuine belief that probably, though the Honorable Supreme Court may pass whatever order, but probably the observations that were made by the Honorable Supreme Court were in passing, should only be taken contextually and not beyond that.
Right, absolutely, Mr. Kapil Sankhla. And at this point in time, We know that there were a lot of drama over allegations and counter allegations that went on. Rahul Gandhi had to vacate his house, and under all these lines, there were massive celebrations also that are taking place today. But when we talk about this big relief, when we talk about not the final verdict but just the stay, what are the limitations of the stay order on his convictions?
Well, the limitations per se are only dependent on three factors. One is, as far as the case is concerned, there would be certain checks and balances which are put in. There are certain requirements and liabilities which are put in when bail has been granted or the right has been granted for a person to uh, to go to the Honorable Supreme Court. It could be, for example, that a person would inform the local thana if he goes to XYZ place. If he's going out of the territory of India, he would inform the concerned court. Probably there would be some embargo on the passport, but that is case dependent. The other is his subsequent conduct or his conduct during the case pending before the Honorable Supreme Court. So, for example, if a similar statement is made, it would definitely go against him, as would go against any other person who has been accused of a particular act. If he repeats that act and he says, and then it is argued that he's a repeat offender, that is already an argument against him that he's a repeat offender. There have been previous cases that have been filed which are of similar nature, and a contempt of court matter which is already pending in the Honorable Supreme Court. Though the Honorable Supreme Court has not given weightage to those allegations, those statements, and those averments at this stage. But on the totality of the circumstances, till the time the case attains finality in the Honorable Supreme Court, his conduct would weigh heavy on the decision of the Honorable Supreme Court as well. And apart from that, whatever other tests or liabilities or issues that have been put on him or conditions that have been imposed on him for the purposes of stay of conviction and of arrest and going to the Honorable Supreme Court. But as I said, that's case specific. We cannot talk about this as far as the larger canvas of criminal litigation is concerned.